Hello and welcome to Unacademy, a one-stop destination for the English medium civil services aspirants. Welcome to the most comprehensive Hindu analysis on YouTube. Let's start the analysis today by looking at the topics. From the Delhi edition of the Hindu, I have chosen 9 important articles. So let's cover all these topics comprehensively so that you don't have to go back and read the newspaper again. But before we start, I have a very important announcement. If you're looking to enroll for our IAS courses, this would be the right opportunity because Unacademy is providing a flat 60% off on all our subscriptions. You can now avail a 6-month subscription at just 19,999 along with the double validity, wherein we will give you a 6-month free extension, and the same applies for 9, 12, and 18 months of subscription as well. So let's say you buy 6 months of subscription, another 6 month subscription is completely on us. And this double validity will apply on the other subscription plans as well. And you'll also get access to CSE Assure. So under CSE Assure, let's say for some reason you don't clear the examination. And if you've enrolled for a 18-month program and above, then Unacademy would essentially provide you for the next attempt completely free of cost to ensure that you realize your IAS dream. So this is a limited time offer. I'm told the offer ends tonight. So those interested, please check out the details in the link provided in the description. And don't forget to enter the code IAS English, because on the subscription page, you will see a different price. And in order to avail the offer, you have to enter the code IAS English. So let's get started and look at the first topic. On page number 10, the Hindu has published a detailed article which will help us understand what are LLMs or large language models, which are the very foundation of the world of artificial intelligence, particularly generative AI. Recently, India hosted the AI Impact Summit, where many Indian startups they presented some of their innovations and models. So one of India's AI startups, which is making a lot of waves, is Sarvam AI, which is a Bengaluru-based AI startup. So Sarvam has rolled out 2 LLMs at the AI Impact Summit. One of the platform is trained on 35 billion parameters, and the second model that Sarvam launched is trained on 105 billion parameters. So in a way, it is comparable to other global models that are available, such as ChatGPT or Gemini or DeepSeek. And even its performance is considered to be at par with some of these global models. But in comparison to the other global models, Sarvam's these billion parameter models, they are trained with much less cost, much less energy. And there are some doubts being expressed by experts regarding its overall performance. But however, within the Indian context, in a limited sample size, Sarvam AI's models have performed relatively well. Of course, when you look at ChatGPT or Gemini, they would have been trained on hundreds of billions of parameters, some even running into trillions of parameters. So, training this LLM is what eventually determines the quality of the output of these AI tools. So, how are these LLMs trained? What is a LLM in the first place? And why is it so difficult for tech companies and startups to train these models? What's the resource requirement here? So, where does India stand in this regard? That is what we can learn and understand from this detailed article. So, first, let's begin with the basics. What do you mean by LLM? LLM stands for Large Language Model. So, a LLM is essentially designed to provide for human like interaction with AI algorithms. So, any AI model which provides for almost a human like interactive experience where it can understand text, process the text, and provide responses predicting the next word in the sentence, framing proper structured sentences, and giving you a clear response. These models, based on neural networks, they adopt machine learning when they're exposed to a huge volume of training data that's made up of billions and billions of parameters. It will learn those patterns. It will basically focus on pattern recognition. And these models will then start predicting as to what should be the response for a certain prompt or a query. So such AI models are referred to as LLMs, large language models, because they are trained on massive amounts of data consisting of billions and billions of parameters. So it's a type of AI model that can understand and generate human-like responses. So the training data is mainly scraped from the internet, the vast amounts of data already available on the internet, and as well as from books, scholarly work, whatever can be digitized. So all the data is fed into the algorithms to train them so that they can recognize those patterns and start providing human-like responses. So these models can perform basic tasks like writing an answer for you, for example, or generating a certain text or a paragraph, or creating a quiz. And eventually, it can be fine tuned for various applications across industries, from writing an entire piece of software code to even running responses in education industry, healthcare industry, in manufacturing. And they have a wide variety of applications. But however, training and developing these LLMs is very, very expensive. The cost is because of two reasons. There are two reasons why LLM models are so difficult and so costlier to develop. One, of course, is the basic infrastructure which is needed. That's your GPUs, the graphic processing units, which are limited in supply and very expensive to procure. The second challenge is with electricity, the energy requirements. Because to run these data centers, you need massive amounts of energy. You need cooling solutions as well to maintain the right temperatures, right? And this makes the very investment very, very expensive and very hard for even large companies to focus upon. So that is one of the reasons why today's AI advances are limited to few companies, few countries. You see even sovereign government-led efforts to focus on training and developing these LLM models. Now, when you look at the big tech industry in the Silicon Valley in the United States, these are companies with big pockets, companies like Google or companies like OpenAI, right? They've been able to invest hundreds of millions of dollars to train these models and expose them to billions and billions of parameters. And no wonder today their responses have become much more fine tuned. But however, they've invested a lot of money, a lot of energy. And these are energy intensive platforms that American tech companies have created. But China, a company called DeepSeek, which brought out its AI model, it showed that there is an alternate path available to develop these LLMs. You can rely on slightly cheaper GPUs, the older version of GPUs, and you can use more optimized methods to train the model and hence bring down the energy requirement, keep the cost low while providing almost similar output, which is comparable to the models in the United States. So this model has become an inspiration for, let's say, AI companies in India as well. And that is exactly the path many Indian AI companies are trying to trace, to focus on localized solutions which can suit India's context. Right now, India doesn't probably need a model like Claude or Gemini or ChatGPT as of now. We need models which can suit the Indian circumstances. Because now, when you look at all the training data which is used to train these LLMs, most of the available data on the internet, it's usually in English language, and there is also a dominance of European languages, French, Spanish, Portuguese, etc., and as well as East Asian languages like Japanese, Korean, and the others. Now, these models may not perform appropriately in the Indian context, particularly for vernacular languages. When you really want to develop a use case for LLM models in India and provide for the diffusion of these models to step up its adoption at the local level, you need to ensure that these models can address local queries. Maybe a farmer who's giving a prompt in Telugu, or maybe a factory worker who's giving a prompt in Marathi, right? Or a tech founder, maybe in Karnataka, giving a prompt in Kannada. So, unless and until the models are trained to handle Indian languages to suit the Indian context, they don't serve a use case, a business case for India in the long run. So, this is the big challenge in front of India's AI companies. Right now, language translation has reached a very mature level with the usage of AI tools. But however, when you're training the data with or training the LLMs with data from English and other languages, then you will have to rely on real-time translation, which further increases the compute power required, the resources required, the energy required. So this is not the most efficient way of building a LLM for the Indian context. If you were to use real-time translation and rely on the similar parameters and models used by Western tech companies, then the Indian AI firms will never be able to develop a, a platform that can suit the local circumstances. Plus, it would be capital intensive and resource intensive and energy intensive. So this is where the Indian companies are really going out of the box, thinking out of the box with innovative solutions and training their LLM models using very unique methods and standards. Now, the government is playing a big role here as well. Because, see, as I said, what you need is essentially access to GPUs, graphic processing units, which are in limited supply and controlled by few countries, particularly the United States. Today, the leading GPU producer in the world is NVIDIA. Then AMD, Intel come a distant second and third. So when these foreign companies already have a almost sort of a dominance in the market, right? Accessing these expensive resources to build the basic infrastructure and data centers is a very costly exercise for a country like India. So the Indian government is doing everything possible to support the AI startups and the private tech companies by establishing common pooled infrastructure which can be rented out, which can be shared between different companies and public organizations as well. So the challenge for Indian AI firms is one, to focus on Indian language based models, ensure that the data used to feed the LLMs and train them are primarily in Indian languages, and account for the cost, the capital, and the resources, which is very scarce. So, this is where India AI mission has been having a transformative impact. Under the India AI mission, the government has set aside up to 10,000 crores with a budgetary allocation. And the goal is to build a pooled GPU infrastructure of at least 38,000 GPUs. So, under this, the government has already procured around 36,000 GPUs. Very soon, it will be scaled to 38,000 GPUs. And this would serve as a pooled infrastructure. So the government has collaborated with other tech companies and firms which are working in this field, firms such as Yota, which runs a massive data center. And these GPUs that the government has procured is now being leased and rented to other AI companies such as Sarvam and the others. We have Gnani AI, Bharat Gen, developed by IIT Bombay. So all these local initiatives, right, coming from research institutions, coming from academia and the AI and tech startups in India, since they themselves can't build these massive data centers and procure the required GPUs, the government is setting up this common pooled infrastructure, which can then be leased or rented for a very, very cheap cost. Now, when you look at Sarvam's two AI models, the billion parameter models that were released and tested, the government has almost directly subsidized the efforts of Sarvam with 100 crore worth of resource contribution. Right? It has given access to the GPUs that the government has set up under India AI mission. And just on the materials alone, the government had spent up to 246 crore rupees. And if you take the compute time and translate that into money, right? Sarvam AI has got benefits worth around 100 crores from the government, right? The Ministry of Electronics and IT is very bullish on the Indian firms, and such capital support and resource support is being provided. Now, this infrastructure would not be used just by one company like Sarva, right? Whatever money has been spent, around 246 crores, this would have a very long life cycle. It can be used by many more companies and research institutions because this is a common pooled cluster, right, which is made available to different startups and research institutions on a rental basis or a leasing basis. So this will reduce the cost for the companies and the researchers while ensuring efficient utilization of a scarce resource. So this path is essentially ensuring that AI companies in India can develop local models trained in local languages that can actually serve a business case. Because you can't expect global companies like OpenAI or Google to immediately focus on vernacular languages and to suit the needs of the local customers. Because for them, it doesn't serve a business interest as of now. And they wouldn't pump millions of dollars into a project where there is no immediate returns in form of revenue and profits. So that's why you need more and more Indian firms developing these localized solutions. And the support and the infrastructure being set up by the government would go a long way in helping these firms to train the large language models. So training these AI models is entirely based on the data it is fed with, the different parameters it is exposed to. So processing these parameters would require massive amounts of energy and cooling solutions. And that is where the government is stepping in to solve the problem for these smaller tech companies in India. Now, when you look at what the Indian companies are doing, what most of the low cost companies and startups are doing, they are following a model known as the MOE architecture, mixture of experts architecture. Please make a note of the term. UPSC might ask a prelims question on LLM and mixture of experts architecture. Now, when you look at major platforms like ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, and the others, they basically run all their parameters and tokens simultaneously whenever a query or a prompt comes in. And this increases the computational power which is required, the energy that is required. Whereas low cost models focus on this approach called mixture of experts, where depending on the prompt, they will activate only certain number of parameters. Only a fraction of parameters are activated, which means it will reduce the compute resource required, the energy required, thus making it much cheaper to train these models using the mixture of experts model. In simple words, let's say there is one student who's trying to read one entire subject in one go. Each time when you ask a question to the student, he's trying to read the entire book and then give you the answer. That will take more time, right? Meaning more effort, more resources. But maybe there's another student, a smarter student, right? He's reading only the sectional chapters or only specific pages when you ask a question and giving you the right answers. Output is pretty much the same, but the approach is slightly different. So, in traditional LLMs that are developed by big companies, which can handle even complex tasks and give very sophisticated outputs, they activate almost all their parameters simultaneously, all the billions and billions of parameters, meaning the cost of running that particular query will increase significantly. The energy consumption shoots up, the processing requirement also shoots up. So, this is a costlier model, though the output is qualitatively better. But there is a cheaper variant of doing this with more or less the same kind of output, where you only activate a fraction of the parameters that are needed to answer a specific query. So this reduces the computational requirement and the energy requirement, making it much more optimal and efficient for small companies and other countries to focus on these cheaper models. Of course, their overall efficacy is yet to be proven. Their business cases are yet to be proven. But India is very confident that with this low cost model, by working with the Indian startups, we can create more localized AI tools and platforms which can serve the local context. So, based on this, take up a practice question. What are LLMs? Where does India stand with regard to training and development of large language models? So based on what we have discussed, please try to practice your answer writing. Now let's move on to the next topic. On page number 8, the Hindu carries an editorial on the HPV vaccine that the government of India has recently rolled out. The Ministry of Health and Family Welfare has rolled out a very ambitious and very crucial vaccination program, mainly focused on girls who are aged 14 years and above. The HPV vaccine is seen as crucial in our fight against cervical cancer. Indian women bear a disproportionate burden of the impact of HPV viruses, which can cause cervical cancer. India registers one of the highest disease burdens in the Southeast Asia region, under which WHO classifies India. According to the World Health Organization, in the Southeast Asia region, or the CRO region as it classifies, India accounts for 65% of cervical cancer cases. making it one of the biggest contributor for cervical cancers in the country, in the region itself. Right? According to data from the health ministry itself, in 2022, around 1.27 lakh cases were reported. 79,000 deaths were accounted for because of cervical cancer caused by certain types of HPV. So first, let's understand what is HPV, right? What is its impact, the disease burden here? How do you deal with HPV? And based on that, let's discuss the vaccination drive that the government is rolling out and its importance. HPV stands for human papilloma virus. So it's a viral infection, it's quite common, and it's a type of STI, a sexually transmitted infection. According to studies, almost all sexually active individuals at some point in their life will get infected with HPV, both men and as well as women. It's very, very prevalent across the world. So any individual who's sexually active is 99% sure to get infected with HPV. But in majority of the cases, it is asymptomatic. It doesn't show up with any signs or specific symptoms. There are hundreds and hundreds of types of HPV. More than 200 types of HPV virus exist. But there are two specific types which are very dangerous. Type 16 and 18. Type 16 and 18 is what is responsible for cervical cancer amongst women. See, in some individuals, HPV, it might occur many months, weeks, or even years after the exposure. And in some cases, it shows up as genital warts in the genital and groin areas. And repeated infection or failure to identify, detect, and treat could lead to abnormal cell mutations, which could cause cancer, particularly cervical cancer in women. It can even cause different types of cancer in the groin area for men as well. So, detecting and treating it on time is something which is very important, but testing remains very low. Through pap smear tests, women in particular can be screened, but testing right now is hardly at 1.9%. If you take the total cases in India, hardly 1.9% women in the country are getting tested through pap smears. So when testing remains low, awareness remains very low, right? It's very essential to combat such diseases through vaccination. And for HPV, there is a vaccine available. So now the government is rolling out the vaccine to prevent the cancer. The vaccine is able to very effectively prevent cancer. It will basically prevent the formation of these abnormal cells, which later turns cancerous, leading to cervical cancer. So this is what WHO also recommends, that having large scale vaccination to achieve herd immunity, focus specifically on girls so that cervical cancer can be dealt with. Today in India, after breast cancer, cervical cancer has become the second leading cause of death, cancer-related deaths amongst women in our country. So that's why it's very important to scale up the vaccination program. And the government has been doing the right thing. And it has just rolled out a nationwide vaccination program focused primarily on girls aged 14 and above. Now, the vaccination would be delivered primarily through government facilities, designated government health facilities, where there would be trained experts, medical practitioners who will be monitoring the patients who will receive the vaccine. Because there would always be a chance of adverse event following immunization, an adverse reaction, allergic reaction, or something which could lead to serious escalation, because there have been incidents in the past, a very dark past in India's history itself, where HPV trials went horribly wrong. This was in 2009, 2010, right? In Gujarat and Andhra Pradesh, a pharma company was carrying out a clinical trial of HPV vaccines. And unfortunately, a lot of protocols and processes were not followed. Some of the recipients were not even informed properly as to what vaccine they were receiving. And around 7 girls passed away in Andhra Pradesh and Gujarat. It resulted in a huge uproar as well, right? There was a government negligence and failure as well in this case. So that's where it's very important for government to build trust on vaccines, because in general you see a anti-vaccination trend across the world, right? Particularly in countries like United States, you have an entire um, stream of extremists, you can call them, right, who are anti-vaxxers, largely inspired by orthodox religion, conservative views. And you see how the Trump administration is taking an anti-vaccination position, and it's even leading to the return of some diseases like measles, which are now spreading widely in the US. So religious customs, personal beliefs, superstition, and even fake news, they all contribute to the anti-vaccination sentiment. And this is where the pharma companies, the government, they have to establish robust mechanisms and processes and put them in place, maintain transparency so that you build trust in the vaccine itself. Because vaccines, if if it is safe and efficient, that is something which can build herd immunity and help deal with these diseases and improve life expectancy. Right? There's no other way out. So it's very essential for the government to establish these standard protocols, focus on safety and efficacy, maintain more transparency when it comes to adverse events following immunization. That's why, under the vaccination program the government is rolling out, uh, the vaccination would be provided just at designated government health facilities. So the government can keep a tight check on what's happening, and it will be administered only in the presence of trained medical practitioners. And if at all there is an escalation or an adverse reaction to the vaccination, immediately there can be a intervention, a medical intervention, to ensure that the impact is limited. So along with this, the editorial is urging the government to ensure that there is more transparency in the data that is shared with the public, so that it builds confidence in the vaccine itself, and that will increase the adoption of the vaccine. So this is what you need to learn from this important editorial. It can be very useful for prelims as well. So please take up a mains question based on HPV and cervical cancer. Now moving on, we will focus on a couple of articles in today's newspaper on page 1 and 9. These articles are related to Prime Minister Modi's ambitious and historic visit to Israel. As you know, Israel is a key strategic partner of India. Both countries, they share very close defense, security, intelligence relations, and close technological collaboration exists between the two. So Israel has been one of India's closest partners in the strategic domain, in the defense and security domain, for many decades. And the trust, the bonds are getting stronger day by day, year by year. So the visit of the Prime Minister is indeed a landmark moment for this bilateral relationship. So let's quickly explore some important aspects of this visit. So Prime Minister Modi, this essentially accounts for the second ever visit by an Indian PM to Israel. The first ever visit by an Indian Prime Minister was also by Prime Minister Modi back in 2017. And now Prime Minister Modi has carried out the second ever visit by an Indian PM. So that itself tells you everything about the complexity of the relationship as well. Given India's position, balanced position on the Israel-Palestine issue, previously Indian prime ministers had largely stayed away from directly visiting Israel, though we maintained close ties. So PM Modi has broken that record, and he has visited Israel twice now, and he was even invited to address the Israeli parliament, the Knesset. Now, this is a gesture which is reserved by Israel only for very close partners like the US president, for example. So, to give such treatment to the Indian PM, that itself symbolizes the close friendship that we share with each other. The Prime Minister yesterday delivered a historic speech to the parliamentarians at the Knesset, and PM Modi was even awarded the highest civilian honor by the Israeli government. So let's see what the PM spoke about. What are the focus areas, and what deals and agreements can we expect out of this visit? So, Prime Minister Modi, first and foremost, when he addressed the Knesset, the main focus was on the issue of terrorism. PM Modi said that India empathizes with the people of Israel for the horrific terror attack that Israel witnessed on October 7th, 2023. a reference to the attack carried out by Hamas. India said we have zero tolerance for terrorism. We don't have double standards. Since India itself is a big victim of terrorism, that to state-sponsored terrorism from Pakistan, India has always extended that support to Israel to fight against terrorism. And we have repeatedly called out this particular attack on October 7th as a terrorist attack. But however, look at the statement very carefully. Look at what the Prime Minister exactly spoke. The PM called out the attack as a terrorist attack, but the group which carried out the attack has not been labeled as a terror group by India. The PM mentioned Hamas, but specifically referred to the attack on October 7th as a terrorist incident, as a terrorist attack. But Hamas itself has never been labeled or officially designated by India as a terrorist organization. That again shows the balanced approach of India on the Israel-Palestine issue. Now, before traveling to Israel, there was one controversial issue which came up, which I would like to discuss first. Recently, Israel has been bringing out few legal changes to the land registration in West Bank, which is Palestinian territory, and it is enabling Jewish settlements which are illegal under international law. The Israeli government itself is getting hold of all the land records in the registration process, and it is essentially incentivizing Jewish settlers to occupy or take more land in West Bank. And these are illegal settlements essentially, as per international law. So we discussed this topic, by the way, just a week ago in our Hindu analysis. So some of you might remember that. So when Israel made this move to carry out these legal changes and to step up the illegal settlements, there was a lot of global condemnation. More than 100 countries at the United Nations, they brought up a resolution criticizing Israel. So what India did was, India did not participate in the direct criticism. We didn't attend that gathering of 100 plus countries where they were directly criticizing the actions of Israel in West Bank. But however, India signed that statement. India signed the same joint statement that was later adopted, which condemns Israel for promoting illegal Jewish settlements in West Bank. So this shows the dichotomy in our policy. And it's not a sign of weakness. This is a well thought out policy of India where we maintain a clear balance between Israel and Palestine. Both are equally important for India. Though India maintains very close and cordial relations with Israel, at the same time, India is always committed to the cause of Palestinian statehood, the right of Palestinians, which was snatched by Israel in 1948 when it unilaterally declared independence. So India has always maintained that ideological commitment. India has also been quite uncomfortable with the disproportionate force Israel has been using in the Gaza war. Though India has not openly condemned Israel for it or voted against Israel, right? We have usually abstained from these votes, especially when Israel is accused of war crimes. India generally abstains from those votes. But that again shows the balanced position. Doesn't mean we are favoring Israel or just blindly favoring Palestine. It shows that India is not comfortable with the kind of force that Israel has been using. More than 75,000 Palestinians have been killed in the conflict, and India is very mindful of that. Right? So India supports the Palestinian statehood movement. This has been a consistent ideological support of India while we maintain close ties with Israel. So this explains why India did not directly participate when these countries were openly condemning Israel just last week. But we signed the statement. When the statement was adopted, India signed it. And within few days, PM Modi is traveling to Israel and celebrating the close friendship. So this is not duplicity. This is a well thought out, balanced policy of India to ensure that we continue our support to the Palestinian cause while maintaining good relations with Israel. So the focus areas of this relationship obviously is defense and security, trade, technology, investments, and as well as people to people relations and labor. These are some focus areas of the relationship. Now, there is another article on page number 9 that provides us the data as well to help us understand this relationship. So when you look at defense and security, Israel is one of the top defense suppliers to India. It's one amongst the top 4 defense suppliers with Russia, France, US, right? Israel is right there at the top 4. And India accounts for 38% of Israel's defense exports in the last decade, according to data from SIPRI. SIPRI is a think tank, right? A Sweden-based think tank, the Stockholm Institute of Peace Research, International Peace Research Institute. So according to the SIPRI report, out of the total defense exports of Israel, 38% was headed towards India, which makes India one of the biggest buyers of Israeli arms, weapons, and defense platforms. In the past, we have procured Israeli drones, such as Heron and Searcher drones, right? Mainly for surveillance. Then India has procured the Falcon AVOC system for early warning, airborne early warning. We have procured the Barak uh, rocket system as well, right? Then we have very close space cooperation as well, right? If you look at the Research series of satellites, the synthetic aperture radar that ISRO developed, that was with Israeli collaboration. Today, we are jointly developing long-range surface-to-air missiles. So across multiple weapon platforms, India-Israel share a very, very close partnership, including in cybersecurity. Then when you look at trade, the India-Israel trade in 1990s, it was barely around $200 million. But over the years, it has grown quite significantly. And before the Gaza war started, let's say in 2022, the bilateral trade was at around $10 billion, which is, of course, way below its potential, but still very significant, given that in 1990s, our trade was hardly 200 million. Now, in 2022, before the Gaza war started, it had touched around $10 billion, with India having a trade surplus of close to $6 billion. Clear? But now, because of the Gaza war, the trade has taken a hit. There have been disruptions in the market. The trade routes have been disrupted because of the Houthi attacks in the region, right? So because of the ongoing conflict in West Asia, India's exports have declined. India's imports from Israel also have declined. Today, the trade volume has come down to just around $3 billion. And India still maintains a trade surplus of few million dollars, around $600 million. So right now, India, Israel are considering a free trade agreement. FTA talks are going on. Maybe it will not be signed during this visit, but in another few months, India, Israel are expected to finalize a free trade agreement, which could fully exploit the potential, the trade potential in this relationship. Now, when you look at the kind of goods, commodities that we trade with each other, India primarily exports oil products, the various refinery products from the crude industry. This is our biggest export to Israel. Then the biggest import of India from Israel, what we buy from Israel is primarily diamonds, the rough cut diamonds, which is brought into places like Surat, where it is polished and turned into jewelry, and we re export this back into Israel. So, this is one of the key parts of our relationship. So, apart from defense trade, we have energy exports, diamond trade, and few key minerals and other commodities. And also, don't forget, Israel is a leading power in the field of technology, especially in agriculture, in water management, in irrigation, because the country has managed to turn a desert into one of the high productive regions of the world. That's primarily through technological intervention, through smart agriculture, through intervention of AI based sensors, right? And better efficient water management practices. Israel also has pioneered a hybrid variety of plants through biotechnology. It is able to provide for very good productivity, even with regard to dairy, animal husbandry as well. So those are some practices India would love to learn from. There are many Indian companies in the agriculture space, in the water management and irrigation space that are investing in Israel to jointly work on these technologies. Right? There are a few government projects as well in this particular domain. Then Israel is a leader in artificial intelligence. There are Israeli tech and AI companies which have investments in India. So we have substantial investments on both sides. From the Israeli side, we have at least around 350 million worth of FDI into India. From the Indian side, a number of companies have pumped at least around $450 million into Israel. So there is significant focus on further increasing mutual investments. And today, Israel is becoming a key market for India's labor force, especially after the Gaza war began. Palestinian workers were replaced by Israel in sectors like caregiving, construction, etc. Indians have always been taking up job opportunities across West Asia as caregivers, especially Indian nurses, right? They get a lot of job offers across the Middle East, North Africa region as primary caregivers for geriatric care. And new opportunities opened up after the war broke out when Palestinians were mainly replaced in construction, and new caregiving opportunities also opened up. So India Israel have signed a labor agreement. This is after the Gaza war started. Now around 37,000 Indian workers are finding employment opportunities in Israel. So there is a very ambitious goal going forward to step up the number of Indians who are working in Israel. India could become the supplier of manpower for Israel's economic reconstruction. And there are Indian students as well, few 900 around odd students studying in Israeli universities. So this is a very robust relationship. And the PM correctly highlighted the age-old ties that Indian subcontinent shares with the Jewish community. Now, if you look at history, the Jews have been one of the most persecuted. Wherever they went, they've been targeted, oppressed, particularly in Europe, right? But India is one place where throughout history, the Jews were never targeted, but they were accepted. You do find Jewish communities in India, in Kerala, in one part of Maharashtra, in West Bengal as well. And they all arrived in India at different points in time through different routes. But wherever they settled in India, they were never persecuted, they were never targeted. They were welcomed and accepted by India's diverse and rich culture. So that is something that the PM highlighted during his speech to the Knesset, right? And when Netanyahu also spoke about India-Israel relations yesterday, he was talking about Indian soldiers who guarded and defended Haifa, the strategic port town, during World War One. How it was Indian soldiers from Mysore, Hyderabad, and Jodhpur, how they defended Haifa against the Ottomans. And that is a mark of close friendship as well between India and Israel. So these ties were highlighted. The Prime Minister has also praised the Abraham Accords of 2020, through which West Asian powers are normalizing their ties with Israel with American mediation. Donald Trump, during his first presidency, pushed for normalization of ties between the major Sunni powers in the Arab world, especially United Arab Emirates. It became the first signatory to the Abraham Accord and the third Arab nation to recognize Israel and set up diplomatic ties with Israel. Then Bahrain also signed the Abraham Accords. So this has brought a new normalcy in the region as well, and relations between some of the Arab states and Israel is in general improving. Right now, the only concern here would be the persistent tensions between Israel and Iran and the ongoing tensions between US and Iran, where there is a likelihood of a war breaking out. That is something India would bring up in the discussions, right? India would try to push Israel to be on the side of peace, to not trigger another regional conflict, because a full-fledged war with Iran would easily blow out of control. It would be something which can destabilize the entire region with a cascading effect for Indian interests, because this is the region from where we get majority of our oil and gas supplies, right? And we have a lot of energy dependency on the trade routes and the choke points like Hormuz and Bab el Mandeb. Then we have a huge Indian diaspora, more than 10 million Indians across the West Asia region who could be at risk because of a conflict if it were to break out. So India would try to counsel Israel and maybe try and tone down the tensions and try to project itself as a possible mediator if required. Because for India, Iran is also equally important. So let's wait for one more day. Let's see the important agreements and deals that will be signed. There's also a proposed initiative called the Hexagon Alliance that Netanyahu has proposed. According to Netanyahu, there is a need for such a Hexagon Alliance that will bring India, Israel together with other like minded partners, including Cyprus, Greece, few African countries, including Egypt and many others, few Asian countries as well, and many Arab states from West Asia. This is a proposed idea. It's still not clear as to which countries would be part of it, but it's an Israeli initiative called the Hexagon Alliance. It's mainly to counter some of the rivals of Israel. It could be Iran, it could be Turkey, right? And probably even Saudi Arabia. So this is a sort of a new axis which is developing. But again, we'll need to wait and watch for formal or official announcements to be made. Now, moving on, let's look at the other small articles in today's paper. On page 10, there's a very insightful article on carbon capture utilization. It's a very important concept, especially for prelims, even for your mains. So let's understand what is carbon capture utilization. Now, this is slightly different from regular carbon sequestration. See, carbon sequestration basically refers to carbon capture. Carbon released from industries like petrochemical industries or refineries or metallurgical industries, thermal power plants, right? The emissions, when they are captured from the atmosphere, right? And that is something which is referred to as sequestration, where you're capturing the carbon, essentially preventing it from getting released directly into the atmosphere because it's a greenhouse gas, which can contribute to global warming. Now, this captured carbon is traditionally stored. That's called carbon capture and storage. This is your traditional carbon sequestration, where the captured carbon is stored in these underground vaults, pumped back into the Earth's crust, never to be released back into the atmosphere, so that you can minimize the concentration of CO2 in the atmosphere. So this is carbon capture and storage, where carbon from industrial emissions is captured and stored away, locked away for a very, very long time, so that it can help in mitigating the impact of climate change. But carbon capture utilization is completely different. In carbon capture utilization, the captured carbon, it is used as a raw material, as a feedstock. This is the utilization part. It is used as a raw material, as an ingredient for various other products. It could be fuel-based products, for building and construction related products, for polymers. So a variety of such products can be produced by using carbon as a feedstock, by using CO2 as a feedstock. You can use it to produce different types of specialty chemicals, fuel, fertilizers, building and construction material, and different types of polymers, where CO2 that's captured from industrial processes can become a raw material, thus creating a circular economy. You're basically recycling it back into the industry. Instead of releasing it into the atmosphere, you're capturing it, but you're not storing it, right? Carbon storage is something different, which is part of carbon sequestration. But here you're utilizing that carbon for other industrial processes, creating a circular economy where you're recycling carbon, using it up in the industry, creating a much more sustainable, efficient industrial process. So, however, this technology is quite expensive. It's not easy to set up carbon capture utilization because you need a lot of factors. You need a lot of incentives and support, policy support from the government as well, right? And you need all the industries to be co-located in a cluster, because let's say the polluting industries are in some place, the carbon utilization industries are hundreds or thousands of kilometers away. Then you need to transport the carbon all the way, either through trucks or through pipelines, which is again very, very expensive and cost intensive, right? So ideally, when you have industries that are co-located, let's say near a thermal plant, there is a carbon utilization industry, maybe a polymer industry. Directly, the carbon captured from there can be supplied to this factory where they are producing polymers using the same carbon dioxide. So co-location of factories and industries is very important. For that, you need long-term planning. So in India, we have the Department of Science and Technology, which has already taken the lead role. The Department of Science and Technology has been providing funds for research and development into carbon capture utilization. Then the Ministry of Petroleum and Natural Gas has also brought out a draft roadmap for 2030 for carbon capture, utilization, and storage. The Petroleum Natural Gas Ministry has already released a draft document to create a clear roadmap for the industries for till 2030 to focus on carbon capture, utilization, and storage. So, such policy support is coming from the government of India. But what they need is incentives, subsidies, because the carbon may not be cheap enough. It's not the cheapest raw material. In an industry like, let's say, fuel and chemical industry, they have other alternatives which are much cheaper, fossil fuel based alternatives. So, if you want to encourage those industries to buy carbon as a feedstock or carbon dioxide, then you need to create an incentive structure where you are incentivizing the companies involved in carbon capture and the ones who are using it as a raw material. Both sides, there has to be an incentive mechanism. So here we can learn from European Union. The EU has brought out the bioeconomy strategy, the EU bioeconomy strategy, and the circular economy action plan. So under this policy, the European Union has created an incentive model and a policy framework to support these industries that are focusing on carbon capture utilization. So such a model could be easily implemented in India as well. An incentive model that promotes the circular utilization of carbon dioxide, capturing it from polluting industries and channeling it towards various other industries that can use it as a feedstock. So this aligns with India's goal of achieving net zero emissions by 2070. See, right now, India is the third largest emitter of CO2 emissions, right? So this could help India to achieve a much cleaner path to decarbonize the economy and set up a circular economy where carbon dioxide is recycled and used back in industrial processes, thus helping us reach the net emission targets, the net zero emission target. Next, a big development from Rajasthan. See, Rajasthan had a policy for its local body elections, for panchayat elections, for municipal body elections, that a candidate who's contesting the elections, they have to meet one criteria. What's the criteria? The two-child norm. Those who have more than two kids, they couldn't contest local polls in Rajasthan. This was a result of the law introduced by the then Byron Singh Shekhawat's government back in 1995, mainly to promote family planning and focus on population control. Back then, Rajasthan had a fertility rate of around 3.6. Rajasthan had a very high fertility rate at around 3.6, which is much higher than replacement level fertility. So in 1995, Rajasthan government had brought this two-child policy that those who have more than two kids, they can't contest local elections. Now, some of them appreciated and welcomed this policy, which has remained for several decades, right? It has been in place for more than 3 decades. Some of them welcomed it, saying it will promote family planning and population stabilization. But some of them were critical because this could create unfairness in the electoral process. It could snatch away the democratic right to contest elections, stand for elections on a criteria where you're basically linking family planning with elections and decentralization. So there has been a lot of criticism against this particular law as well. But however, now the Rajasthan cabinet has approved two bills to scrap this restriction, to remove the two-child norm, because right now Rajasthan's fertility rate is just at around 2, which is just below replacement level fertility. Replacement level fertility is 2.1, and Rajasthan's fertility rate, according to government reports, has gone down to around 2, meaning population stabilization has been achieved. And Rajasthan could even probably see a decline in the coming decades. So Rajasthan's government is now making a move to abolish this two-child norm and remove this cap so that it can create a much level playing field in local elections. So this has been done right before the upcoming civic body polls. Next, the United States has again shocked India, right? And I think there's nothing new in this. We are used to such repeated disruptions by the United States under President Trump. The US has now announced 126% tariffs on India's solar exports. Not just India, even Indonesia and Laos. These three countries are being hit with 126% tariffs for importing, or rather, India exporting solar photovoltaic cells. So essentially, those who import solar photovoltaic cells in the US from countries like India, Indonesia, Laos, those traders would be subjected to a back-breaking 126% tariff, which could probably crush the industry itself. See, India is a key source for photovoltaic cells for the US. India exports around $1 billion worth of photovoltaic cells and other solar equipment, which is used by American solar industry. But however, the US manufacturers have exerted a lot of pressure on the Trump administration that in countries like India, Indonesia, Laos, the governments are giving subsidies for the solar sector. And they allege that these subsidies given by India, they are in violation of the WTO norms on subsidies. While India denies these charges, India says the subsidies we provide for clean renewable energy sector is in line with the WTO standards. But from the American industry, the solar manufacturers in the US who feel threatened by Indian products, they have lobbied with the Trump administration, and now the US has levied 126% tariffs. Previously, the tariff on Indian solar products was at 40%. That itself was considered as very high. Now, 126% tariffs could crush this export. And this could have an impact on India's solar industry because US was one of the biggest export markets for India's solar industry. Clear? Now, how would this affect the trade deal, the interim trade agreement? Because see, under the interim trade agreement, which is proposed to be signed next month, US has committed to 18% tariffs on India. Now, after the Supreme Court in the US has struck down all the reciprocal tariffs of Trump administration, Donald Trump has now brought out a 15% baseline tariff on all the countries. So, this lack of clarity that on one side you're agreeing to 18% tariffs, now the Supreme Court is striking down all these old reciprocal tariffs, and US has brought out a new 15% baseline tariff. Upon that, they are targeting specific sectors. Like this, they have specific tariffs on steel and aluminum exports as well of India. So then, what's the clarity with regard to the trade agreement, right? So this is something which could create problems for the trade negotiations which are going on, and it could create uncertainty about the signing of this trade deal itself. So right now, India is closely watching the developments, studying these developments. Most likely, India will wait for some time. India may not rush to sign the trade deal now that the Supreme Court in the US has struck down these tariffs as unconstitutional, right? So let's see how things will play out. But one thing is for sure that such policies of uncertainty and constant disruption is never good for the industry. It's never good for the economy. Now, coming to the prelim section, let's quickly look at the small topics and then wrap up the session for today. On page 5, there's an article that refers to the Eurasian diving duck. The Eurasian diving duck, which falls under the SMEW category of ducks, it has been spotted at Kaziranga in Assam, the Kaziranga National Park and Tiger Reserve. See, in Kaziranga, there was a bird census. The 7th water bird count was being carried out because in the Kaziranga protected area, there are multiple wetlands which are of great importance for water birds and migratory birds. So there is a periodic regular bird census which is carried out. And as part of this study, the enumerators have come across the sighting of the SMEW, which is of Eurasian origin. It's a Eurasian diving duck. Now, this is a very rare occurrence because the Eurasian diving duck, though they are migratory, they don't venture out as far as Northeast India, ever. At the maximum, they have been found in parts of Himachal Pradesh, Uttar Pradesh, in some wetlands over there, particularly during the winter months in Europe and in the Eurasia region, right? They migrate out of there and move towards the warmer tropical regions like India. But they often settle in wetlands present in northern, western parts of India because they are primarily fish eaters, right? and they have never moved as far as Northeast India. So the detection of the Eurasian diving duck as far as Northeast India is being seen as a sign of climate change. Migration being driven by climate change, because this is peculiar behavior from this particular species. Though it's not a threatened species per se, the very fact that the migratory patterns are changing, similar patterns are seen when it comes to other Eurasian migratory birds and birds from Siberia, right, which often travel as far as South India. You often see changes taking place in their migratory routes and in the season and the pattern as well. And researchers believe that these are indicators of climate change, right? So those who study the Central Asian flyway, which is a key migratory route for most of these migratory birds, which move from the very frigid climate in the Eurasia region, right, towards the warmer tropical region. They have a traditional route that they follow. So any changes, any abnormalities that they show in their behavior, in their migratory patterns, it is often seen as a sign of distress, right? So environmental experts, researchers are considering this to be a sign of the impact of climate change on migration of these birds. Next, ISRO has brought out the post accident analysis report of the failed launch of NVS 02 satellite. Recently, ISRO had placed a lot of hopes on this massive launch, right? It was launched using the GSLV as part of the NavIC constellation. The NavIC is a regional satellite constellation that India is building under the Indian Regional Navigation Satellite System, which is the Indian version of the American GPS, or GLONASS of Russia, or Galileo of Europe, and Beidou of China. So India has a very modest set of constellation of satellites, around 7 to 11 satellites that can provide a coverage of around 1,500 kilometers around India, which provides for civilian navigation and even for military navigation and military precision targeting. But however, the NavIC project is now suffering major setbacks because out of the 7 to 11 which are supposed to be functional, hardly 4 remain operational today. And NVS 02, the failure of the launch, was a very, very big setback for India and ISRO. So though it was placed in an elliptical orbit by the launch vehicle, it failed to carry out the orbit rising maneuver. All the solar panels deployed, every other autonomous function was on track, but the final orbit raising maneuver failed and it did not reach the intended circular orbit. So thus the satellite launch failed. So ISRO carried out a detailed analysis because it has seen few such incidents in the past, and that too with critical projects which have military and strategic value. So this had raised a lot of speculation as well about any foreign interference. So the investigation has established that a specific electrical system failed. There was supposed to be a signal, electrical signal sent to a key valve in the oxidizer unit. In the final stage, the oxidizer unit was supposed to open up its key valve that would release the propellant and result in combustion. But for that, there should be an electrical trigger which was supposed to be sent. This signal, the activation signal, failed to reach the intended site. This is largely because of a possible electromechanical failure. So this incident analysis is very crucial. It offers lessons of how to build redundancies in upcoming missions. Because in the past, ISRO has shown great resilience to learn lessons from previous mistakes. Previously, one of India's military satellites, the GSAT 7R, this is a key naval satellite for the Indian Navy for maritime communication, maritime domain awareness. It was eventually launched successfully after some key lessons that were learned from the past failures, especially in the pyro technique triggers that release and push the payloads. Some mistakes were detected and redundant systems were created, backup systems were created to ensure it's a fail-proof and foolproof system. So similar lessons will be adopted for the upcoming GSLV launches and NavIC satellite launches. But the setback for NavIC is very huge because it will take many months, even few years, to ensure that we have a operational constellation of satellites to keep NavIC functional. Right now, just 4 of them are operational, and even they are at the end of their life cycle. Coming to the last topic for today, on page 15, there's a reference to a new emission norm that the Indian government is considering. It's called the CAFE 3 norms. It's developed by the Bureau of Energy Efficiency, and it stands for Corporate Average Fuel Efficiency Norms. These emission norms will primarily apply for the automobile industry, for the heavy vehicle manufacturers, for the car manufacturers in India. They will have to follow these new standards of emission, which means they will have to innovate, they will have to invest new capital and ensure that they match up to these new emission standards which are being proposed. And it's proposed to be implemented from next year, from 2027. But it's yet to be approved by the government. So the Prime Minister's office held a key meeting, a high level meeting yesterday on the implementation of CAFE 3 norms. The government is yet to take a final decision because there's a lot of opposition coming from the heavy vehicle industry. Because heavy vehicle industry believes that strict norms are being placed on them while exemptions are being given for small car industries. So it has led to a divide within the automobile industry. So now the government is trying to resolve this, and it's consulting with all the stakeholders before it notifies the implementation of the CAFE 3 norms. So these are emission standards for vehicle manufacturing that is brought out by the Bureau of Energy Efficiency. So on this note, I conclude my analysis for today. And if you like the session, do press the like button, share your comments, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching.